Hey everybody! We just got back from a fantastic vacation in Bavaria where we visited a bunch of beautiful cities and had some delicious and memorable meals. And this dish was one of my favorites. I'm making this sweet apricot dumpling that everyone is gonna love. So let's get started. Let's get started by making the dough, and you're gonna want to do this at least 4 hours ahead of time, but the day before is even better. Now let's take a look at the ingredients. This recipe calls for a cup of creamy farmer's cheese, and that's not something that I find in the grocery stores around here. So you can substitute with ricotta or mascarpone cheese, or even some small curd cottage cheese if you're in a pinch. But since farmer's cheese is very easy to make, I've made my own. It's a great recipe to have in your tool bag, so let me show you how to make it. This farmer's cheese is so easy to make, and it's one of those recipes that's so simple and good that every time I make it, I say to myself, I'm going to make this every time I need some. And that quickly flies out the window and I end up buying ricotta. But even if you only get around to making this every now and then, it's certainly worth the effort. And if you have people over and you serve them something that you've made with your own cheese, unless they're completely snooty foodies, they're going to be pretty impressed. There are only a few ingredients for this, and the first is going to be 1 gallon or 4 liters of whole milk. And I can only get pasteurized milk around here because of some rules and regulations. But if you've got access to some of that good stuff that comes right off the farm, that's definitely the way you want to go. What you don't want to use is the ultra pasteurized milk or the high temperature pasteurized milk. That stuff will not set up and you'll just end up with a pot of hot and sour milk. Now aside from my milk, I'm going to need some acid to make this curdle. And you could use 1/2 cup of white vinegar or apple cider vinegar or lemon juice or any combination of those, as long as you get about 1/2 cup or 100 milliliters. And then I'll just need a little bit of salt to flavor that. And it's not completely necessary, but a good handheld thermometer is pretty useful when you're making this. So a nice heavy pot helps with this for even heating. I use whatever you got. Aluminum's probably not a great idea though. That could be reactive. So we'll just go in with the whole gallon of milk. I'm going to heat this just under medium heat, so I don't want to scald it. I'm just going to bring this up just barely a simmer, and I'll stir it every now and then with a wooden spatula. It's probably going to take 10 or 15 minutes. If you don't have a handheld thermometer or a candy thermometer, what you're looking for is for this to get really foamy and then just barely start to simmer, and you're going to be right about there. But if you do have a good handheld, what you're looking for is 190 degrees Fahrenheit or 88 degrees Celsius. As long as you're somewhere between 190 and 205, you're good to go. And at that point, turn off the heat or take it off of the heat. And now you're going to go in with your vinegar or your lemon juice. And go easy, go kind of slow, and just stir that in so it gets thoroughly stirred in. It'll start to curdle immediately. And just stir that around a few times just to make sure it gets mixed in. And now, set a timer for 15 minutes, and you can just walk away. All right, after 15 minutes, I'm gonna stir in my lemon zest. You can use whatever you want here. Any fresh herbs. Some dill is really nice. Black pepper, red pepper, jalapenos. Try a lot of different stuff. And now we need to strain this. So make sure you got a bowl or a container big enough that it can collect all the whey, and line a colander with a damp cheesecloth. So I'm going to carefully pour this into here. Probably going to make a big mess. Yes, I'm making a big mess. There are better ways to do this. Now stir in a teaspoon of salt. I think I need a little bit larger strainer next time. Now I'm going to let this sit here for a few minutes until it's cool enough to handle, and then I'll squeeze out more of the whey, and then we'll form this. Now we'll just bunch that up, twist it, and squeeze out a bunch more of that whey. Just about as much as you can get out of there. So we'll take a look in here, and you can see now it's pretty dry, it's firm, and it's kind of crumbly. Tastes nice though. The recipe I'm doing calls for a creamy farmer's cheese, so I'm gonna get 1 or 2 tablespoons of the whey and stir it right back in there. Now let's get this out of here again. Pull up the cheesecloth. Now this time I'm not going to squeeze out any liquid, but I'm just going to kind of form that into a ball. And I'll just fold that cheesecloth under there, get it kind of flat. Now pop another plate on top of here. Just press lightly, and I'll put this in the refrigerator for at least an hour until it sets up. And that is how you get started making cheese. For this recipe, I didn't actually have to form and press that cheese at all, and that makes it a little bit more dry than I'm going to be using today. So I've taken some of that and added some of the whey back in to make that a little bit creamier. For this recipe, I've got 1 cup or 250 grams of that fresh farmer's cheese. This is 1 cup or 150 grams of all-purpose flour. And this is just a couple of tablespoons of semolina flour to help with texture. I've got 1 egg and 3.5 to 4 tablespoons of butter, and that is 70 grams. And finally, I'll need just a pinch of salt. I'll start by creaming the butter. I'm just going to mix this for a couple of minutes until it gets nice and smooth and a little lighter in color. Now, I'll add in the egg. That's good enough for now. And let's get that cheese in there and keep mixing that. Now let's go in with those dry ingredients, both flours, and a good pinch of salt. Now what you should have is a very soft dough. This is a little bit softer than biscuit dough, if you're familiar with that. And now I'll pop the dough into the refrigerator to rest for at least 4 hours. but I'm probably gonna go overnight with this one.
Tomorrow.
Let's get started by getting a pot of salted water and bringing that up to a gentle boil. Alright, this dough is nice and rested. So now it's time to roll it out into a cylinder. Make sure your hands are floury because this is a soft and sticky dough. And now do your best to cut that into 8 equal sized pieces. And now you want to get some nice ripe apricots, and you want to look for small ones. The ones we had over there were no bigger than golf balls, and those are kind of hard to find around here. And the really big ones, they kind of fall apart when you cook them. And if you can't find small apricots, go ahead and use a little plum. That's going to be really good too. So we're going to pop the stones out of here. Just jab anything in one end. You'll feel that thing, it'll pop right out the other side. And now, for the magic, we're going to replace that stone with a sugar cube. You could pop 2 in there if you like things that are really sweet. Now, let's get one of these ready. We're just going to flatten that dough out into a nice disc. It's going to be pretty thick still. And you just pull that all the way up and around your apricot. Push it and push it over the opening. Bring it up. Push it over the open end. And then just pinch that guy closed. And give it a roll, kind of even things out just a little bit. Make sure it ends up looking pretty seamless around where you sealed it. And we're going to drop that right into our simmering pot. Now I'm just going to gently move those around a little bit for a few moments so they don't stick right to the spot where I plopped them in there. And now we'll keep these going on a gentle boil for 15 to 20 minutes. As those dumplings are simmering away, it's time to get the breadcrumb topping ready. And this is just going to give a nice little sweet and crispy finish to that big old dough ball. So we'll start by melting 3 tablespoons of butter over about medium heat. Now we're going to go in with 1 cup of plain breadcrumbs. That's 150 grams. Those are just plain white breadcrumbs. I personally think that some graham cracker crumbs would be really great on this, but I'm sticking to the recipe today. I've got 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and we'll go with 1 tablespoon of sugar. Now we're just going to crisp these up for a couple of minutes. You should get a real nice toasty aroma coming off there as they cook. And keep them moving so they don't burn down there. You'll see some nice toasty color coming on pretty quick. And then you're done. All right, these are looking good now. None of them have come apart, so now I'm going to take them out of there. Kind of shake off some of the excess water, and some of that'll steam right off of there, because I don't want to get my breadcrumbs really, really wet, because I've got another batch of these to go. And then plop those guys right down into the breadcrumbs while they're still a little sticky. Get those breadcrumbs to stick on there. Now just roll these all around in the breadcrumbs. Coat it up really nice. And that's gonna also cover up any blemishes you got there. Now this is just a little honey butter. It's 2 parts honey, 1 part butter, melted. I'll put a little bit of that down first. Then we'll plop a big old dumpling right on there. Now, pour a little more of that honey butter right over the top of there. Hit that with a little mound of those breadcrumbs. A little more crunch. And of course, you could always give that a little shake of the white stuff. A little powdered sugar on there. And even a tiny bit of cinnamon on top of that. Hit that with the obligatory mint leaf. And there you have it. Now I'm going to run this one up to my wife, and then I'll come back and see how we did. Now let's see how we did. You can see that dough is pretty thick, and that is just like the one that I had in Austria. Check out that bite. Ooh. Hold on a sec. Oh man. Ooh. Oh, that's good. Even though the dough is thick, it works because the inside is really nice and juicy. And because the dough isn't sweetened, the whole thing is not overly sweet. Of course, that depends on how much of that honey butter you put on there. It's got a really nice balance of sweet and tart from the apricot. And it's not a real puffy dough at all. It's kind of pasta-like. It's got some nice toothsomeness to it. Reminds me a lot of the slickers that we put in chicken and dumplings. And that crispy finish from the breadcrumbs. Oh yeah, that is just beautiful. Just a little textural exclamation point. I had this at a monastery in Austria where it was served with some hot coffee, and that was fine. But those funky monks up there also make very, very good apricot schnapps, so I feel like a little sip of that is appropriate with this today. And this ended up being a very close rendition to the one I had there using our local ingredients. This was our first time traveling overseas, and it was really a dream trip for us. And I hope that any of you who want to travel get that opportunity. But until you do, I hope you try this, and I know you're gonna love it. Thanks for watching. Prost!